Now, you know what's funny? I have to tell you, I don't understand. Like Dave Rubin is boring and not good and very self-evidently extremely limited in his intellectual capacity. And, Tucker Carlson on Fox News, the biggest news network, he's doing stealth alt-right nationalist signaling better than anybody else in the game. He's incredibly effective at this. I don't know why you need some of these sort of YouTube knockoffs. This guy's the best in the game, and that's why he's so despicable and dangerous.
Do you think it's stealthy?
I think I think yes. In that world, I do. Because I think that you're talking on a continuum of people that includes Richard Spencer. You're not talking on a continuum of
He knows
people.
how to maintain deniability.
Precisely. He knows how to maintain deniability, though it's getting awful close here. Here is Tucker Carlson from last night talking about demographic changes. But honestly, yes, what he's doing here is obvious. But before we get to, we'll condemn it morally, but watch how he does this. He's very, very effective at this.
A recent piece in National Geographic tells you a lot about demographics in America and about how bewilderingly fast they're changing without any real public debate on the subject. The magazine profiles the small coal mining town of Hazleton, Pennsylvania. In the year 2000, Hazleton's population was 2% Hispanic. Just 16 years later, Hazleton is majority Hispanic. That's a lot of change. People who grew up in Hazleton return to find out they can't communicate with the people who now live there. And that's bewildering for people. That's happening all over the country. No nation, no society has ever changed this much, this fast. Now, before you start calling anyone bigoted, consider and be honest, how would you feel if that happened in your neighborhood? It doesn't matter how nice the immigrants are. They probably are nice. Most immigrants are nice. That's not the point. The point is, this is more change than human beings are designed to digest. This pace of change makes societies volatile, really volatile, just as ours has become volatile. And notice where this change is not happening. Any place our leaders live. They caused all of this with their reckless immigration policies, and yet their own neighborhoods are basically unchanged. They look like it's 1960. No demographic change at all in their zip codes. Our leaders are for diversity, just not where they live.
So let's actually run this down here because there's a lot going on that we need to really pick apart. First, by identifying the class divide here in terms of these policies and who affects them, he's going back to the 1970s and busing in Boston as an example. And a lot of the white backlash to busing, which absolutely was virulently and violently racist, also was rooted in these policies get designed in Harvard Yard. These policies get designed in Beacon Hill. Those neighborhoods are not getting integrated. Those neighborhoods are not changing. Why are we at the tip of an experiment? Now, of course we condemn the racism, but if you can't understand the appeal and the savvy of that particular line of argumentation, especially in conjunction with all of these other policies that really have been abusive to people economically, that have gutted their livelihoods, exported their jobs, decreased their wages, created opioid crisis, that's a real sentiment that he's manipulating and tapping into and can't just be dismissed. It needs to be understood strategically. Then he's making an assertion about the pace of change, which, again, we can't just dismiss, but that's where he's just jumping and making a normative claim that comes out of left field and can be contested. But it follows from a couple of other natural assumptions that, yes, that's an incredibly fast pace of change. We need to look at why and how it's actually operated. In a lot of these places, populations are shrinking. If you want to keep up any type of economic activity and replenish the town and keep a tax base going, they're going to need to look radically different demographically. This is the same thing that's happening in Europe as well. So if on one hand you're having a social backlash, you also need to recognize that your viability is actually connected with and synchronized with the immigrant communities that are coming. So I just think it's very important to tease apart specifically what he's doing, because he does it very savvily, so that we have an answer to all of these points, such as pace of change. What does that even mean? These communities need immigration to sustain and grow. And finally, on the last point, you're right about unaccountable elites, such as yourself, Tucker. You don't live in any of these communities. Why are you fomenting nativism, racism, xenophobia, and division in places that need to figure out how to govern themselves, rebuild their communities, and demand accountability, whether they've been in a town as Irish people for generations or they just came in from Guatemala? That's how it's reframed and addressed. It can't just be a moral reaction to him. It has to be deeper.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Japan, that's sort of an example of what happens when you don't replace a shrinking population with immigrants, right? Because they have almost no immigration there.
Right.
And it's this weird kind of twilight society that's sort of coasting on some economic shit I don't totally understand with their currency.
Well, they have a really advanced economy. I mean, they've had a lot of stagnation, but they have world-class corporations and really high living standards. But yeah, they don't have, I think they're at negative population growth.
Yeah, it's a much more advanced society and economy, and I feel like that is the way he wants the U.S. to go, too.
I think yes. I think Japan actually, I mean, that's in some ways a more benign case, but I think that's actually true in terms of the type of thing that these people are looking at.
Just two things.
Yeah.
We've kind of gone over them, but the issue where he says humans aren't made to adjust to this type of change, it'd be nice to have any sort of empiricism.
Yeah, well, that's just the assertion.
Right.
I could just as easily say human beings are designed to thrive on adaptability and innovation.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, all of that's the part that's just
and
bullshit.
The other thing that's definitely bullshit is no society has changed this much before. Like, you can imagine like a Choctaw Tucker Carlson saying, like, nobody's debating this.
Nobody's debating it. There was only one white guy out of my teepee, and look, a lot of them are nice. Some of them try to give you smallpox on your blankets. Others of them are nice. But the point is the pace of change. The point is how many of us are being raped and killed and thrown off our lands.
And I don't think he's worried about like sort of Brooklyn neighborhoods all of a sudden becoming a lot whiter.
Yeah, right. I don't know if this applies to. Yeah, is he an anti-gentrification activist in Crown Heights? Because there's just too many whack cafes opening and pricing working families out of their homes that have been there for generations.
He doesn't mean that kind of change.
Yeah, I would assume he does not mean that kind of change.
Isn't that progress?
Isn't that progress? Actually, Dante Nero pointed something out about this, where Tucker had on a guest who was basically talking about his advice to his children, very Tucker segment on his advice and his children. He's a black professor, I think, and writer. He gave his children advice on having white friends and establishing trust for them or not, whatever. And Tucker's doing his whole, like, I'm 48 years old. I was told to judge everybody as an individual, which is like, yeah, okay, Tucker, sure. You were the only Swanson family heir in like your late 40s who grew up with complete racial blindness.
Now let me do a segment on gypsies.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Gypsies are smelly. I wasn't raised to judge them. It's like a fucking Colbert sketch.
There was no individual gypsy in that group that you could like.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Please. Okay. But the thing that was funny though that Dante caught. I don't want to play in any way to the nativism, but the guest was kind of talking about, well, wait, there's historical context for this. And one of the things Carlson said was like, well, what if a white person comes from Berlin? They are not part of the same historical context. And then it was like, well, wait a second. I thought we weren't supposed to cater to immigrants. Like, whatever. Look, it's disingenuous. It's word games. It's nonsense, but he's very good at it. And when he taps into very real things. I mean, he is one of, in fact, way more than a guy like Dave Rubin. When he has on Mark Blythe, when he talks about economic elites, he's building a lot of currency with himself on fusing those messages together. And that's always been the most dangerous part of Trumpism. And that's what Bannon and Carlson and the nationalists understand. And that's really dangerous and needs to be decoupled.